detected.
Grab him. Hey, what are you doing?
It's a very good time to be a sci-fi fan and a gamer. Not so great a time to be a YouTuber, but certainly being a gamer of over 10 to 15 years, you're getting to see some of the original IPs, A, get worked on or reworked, B, get re-released under a different studio with a totally different angle, or C, the original inception, the original idea from 2008 still being available and still looking very good. That's what this video is about. I am CouchCoop, and I'm going to be looking at the original Dead Space from 2008, but running on modern day systems. This has been done before and a lot by YouTubers. It's not the freshest of ideas. Mandalore did almost the exact video about 5 years ago, but Callisto Protocol wasn't out and we didn't have this remaster right on the horizon. It's less than a week away. What really interesting stuff he's talking about is that this was made as a System Shock sequel that then got changed at the last minute. It really doesn't feel like that. Resident Evil 4 had just come out and stormed it on console with this great close quarters, over the shoulder camera position, dark and spooky corridors, and some really good ballistic mechanics and weapon variety. None of which is applicable to what's been playing in the background, which is the Callisto Protocol newest trailer. The game's been out for a couple of months. It kind of got slated for having a weird close quarters combat system, but I'm going to give it the time of day it deserves when that remaster of Dead Space comes out. What's the connection with this and Dead Space, I hear you ask? Well, it's the legacy team that actually came up with that original game that were involved in the production and the creation of Callisto, so that's super interesting.
This is the emergency maintenance team of the USG Kelly and responding to your distress call.
Isaac Clarke.
This is one of the more beefier, not too recent trailers of the new Dead Space remake that is coming out on the 27th of this month. And what I've straight away noticed, and what is good news, I think, is that this is a bit like the Demon's Souls deal, where it's just a complete blueprint of that original game that's really raised up to current gen standards on a visual level. None of that bedrock mechanic is going to be mucked around with. I think we're going to see some minor changes in UI, maybe some of that ease of life, so it's going to be really interesting how that all comes to fruition when this game comes out in less than a week. It's also coming out at full price, £70 British. That's quite a lot of money for a video game. That's why I've spent about 35 to 40 hours in the 2008 game recently over these last couple of weeks to see if that's really worth a replay and paying that extra money to just see the game at a higher graphical level. That's a bit of a conundrum and we're going to try and solve it in this video. Okay, well, let's get started by looking at it, and I do just want to say I know I moan a lot, but there's few times in my line of work with YouTubing and gaming where I really feel like something's awesome has been put in front of me. And to get this on PC after seeing it on a ancient console, going into the settings and mucking around with stuff and getting it crisp, I put it over at the 4K. Wow, I had such a good time with meddling around with this, but I will say the V-Sync's a bit all or nothing. Putting it on only gave me 30 frames per second. Taking it off gave me an average of 150 frames per second, which I don't actually have a screen to cater for that amount. So it was a bit of a weird one. I went for the 120 sort of area because I really wanted to see it smooth as a mother.
Let's get some extra hands from flight deck to help out.
Hold still, Isaac. I'm syncing up everyone's rig with the ship. Okay, we're done. Clean bill of health for everyone.
And sure enough, as soon as that blue energy bar filled up, it all came back to me. The eyes on that NPC are a bit scary, but it's an important point to talk about this spinal energy representation. It was such a revolutionary idea. Even the neons that are coming off Isaac himself were quite strange to someone who was thinking they're going to be playing a really dark and dreary sci-fi game, and you're met with all this amazing tech and visual fidelity, especially with the UI system. And everybody said it before, but this game kind of broke the mold with trying to keep the UI flush and minimal and pulling things up in real time in the game.
Use run to move quickly.
It was kind of like you can't pause me thing, and From have grabbed that with both hands. Most online only games do it now as standard, but this wanted to give you that feeling of you're always involved, even if you're in and out of your menu system.
With 62 years of continuous service, it holds.
Notice the tracking and mapping of my position isn't retrospectively fed to the AI of the NPC, so she was looking in sort of at nothing when I had moved positions. That sort of stuff you take for granted when you look at the bedrock making of modern games, but kind of cute. I like the idea of it having these smaller noticeable age nuances. It gives the game a bit of charm. And before I continue, I will say, if you haven't played this, it is on Game Pass, and if you own a PC, you've got to get it fired up, because going back to this again, 14 years have passed in the gaming industry and in the sort of sci-fi horror gaming sphere. This was where it really started for me, where it felt like AAA, even Hollywood style production, and certain traits and tricks used by big name Hollywood directors was all pumped into an amazing sci-fi adventure. That's why I'm so shocked at the System Shock thing, that this was a last minute change and everything was like switched around just before launch. That would normally spell complete disaster for a video game. We'll get back to that point. I did want to cover with that jump scare that came in, the game is too loud. In my old age and my constant need for peace and quiet, I have realised that, blimey, and again, the capture, everything's had to be put down. Okay, so I've put that VSync on, and there we go, 30 frames per second, which nearly made me spit on the ground. But the horizontal fixes when you're in this mode, i.e. how the game looks in 4K, it seems to be a very smooth presentation on the resolution front, and there isn't any screen tear. That is what you were seeing on a minute level when you turned that VSync off, which is understandable because that's what the damn thing's there for. But the trade-off, this 30 frames per second, I couldn't handle it. I had to go back to that 120, but there is a sweet spot which I'll get to. I had this weird memory that came out of me. 2008 was a very long time ago. Back then, on the Xbox 360, you could capture. You couldn't do anything with the capture, but you could just have it on your desktop, and you could even screen grab and make a background from it, I seem to remember. But anyway, there's a point in this game where these small spider-like creatures try and get inside your skull, and if they accomplish that task, the game still runs as your dying animation is playing, and it's horrific, and the whole screen goes red, and of course you've got that clatter and noise and screaming and orchestra all going. And I remember slack-jawed as I rewatched that clip. It was like a sort of 50s B-movie amount of cheesy situation. You've got a damned spider thing hanging out of this guy's head, but at the same time it had this like video nasty like 80s vibe to it. It was horrifically gory, this game, to be on console at that time. It kind of slid past the radar. Manhunt didn't, but this one didn't flag up too much. The game is horrendously violent, and it was such a shock to me, and I kept that footage on the system for years. It might even still be on there. But I distinctly remember that was what was selling it back then. That was what its advertising campaign was revolving around, and that was what the game really gave you. It was unbridled, like disemboweling, cutting limbs off, completely horrific sci-fi action. And it hasn't really aged at all in that time. It is still up there with one of the more harrowing sci-fi video games. Alien Isolation's probably one, maybe Doom Eternal, and of course that new Callisto Protocol. So that brings me up to the video's £70 conundrum. Dead Space from 2008 plays on my PC like an absolute damn dream, and it's breathed new life into the game, and I'll probably finish it before the 27th, and then I've got to go through Dead Space again. So we really need to see some innovation, I'm thinking. There needs to be a hook for me to go through all of that material for a second time, back to back. And I'm thinking it might be the DLC. There was quite a bit for it. There was more for the sequel, I seem to remember. But that's why I'm talking about ease of life changes, that UI system. Maybe they add a new weapon. The list goes on to some of my issues with making an identical remake, Demon Souls style. That also brings me over to the game's controls. That camera is ridiculously close. I don't know how I missed that shot in that elevator. That was a meter by meter room and I still managed to fire a bullet and not hit anything. That's because there's this weird blind spot with sweeping the camera around. It all of a sudden slows down or goes really quick. I can't explain it. It's supposed to increase the claustrophobic atmosphere of the game, which it totally does. But there are better techniques to do that now, and I think they'll employ some of them with this remake. What actually happened to the Dead Space series? Let's talk about that, because it's interesting. It's not like the Bioshock series where it kind of almost finished strong. This was wrung dry and drilled into the ground. EA got all over it, put the corporate fingers in it. By the time we got to Dead Space 3, we were looking at an online multiplayer battle royale. We weren't, but it wasn't the game that it originally started as. Dead Space 2 was not bad, and that's another thing that interests me, and I would have much prefer to see that remade. I know that's controversial, but I've got loads more incentive to play that because I clean can't remember any of it. That might be because it wasn't as memorable as this. Let's talk about 3 really quickly, because I would have liked that to work. 3 was an online co-op game, and this does scream online co-op because of its tension, because there could be a lot of communication. Resident Evil 5 managed it quite well with sharing and adding that dependency. I don't think it was this online multiplayer co-op that ruined it. They put a lot of like troops and humans in it, and I think there was a cover mechanic, and it's like, oh my god, I'm playing a diluted version of The Division. One of the more important aspects of the Dead Space series is the solitude and the fact that you are on Ishimura completely on your own. There is no one on your side bar a few friendly NPCs. So the desertment, the isolation, it really does go towards what the original game is all about. I think we're going to see a change in how those powers manifest. I think the engine that the new game's going to run in is going to awestruck us with how cool it is, moving objects around. The slowdown mechanic is going to look absolutely amazing, and you can see some of that splatter getting thrust around as the camera gets beautifully high frame rates on some slowed down death scene. One of the cooler things that straight away grabbed you with the original game were the dissipation mechanics and sort of fragment of the enemies lying around. You can even pick them up and thrust them in to the monsters themselves. That was a stand up in my chair moment in 2008. Necromorphs, they're called, and the lore in this game is deep. I think we'll get more in the remake, but it's the sequel that goes super crazy on the origin story, what happened with the disastrous extinction event that's occurred on Earth. There's a hell of a lot going on with the backstory and this lot. So I'm going to get the new remake, and I'm going to get Callisto Protocol, and I'm going to hold those two up against each other. I think that's more applicable, seeing as they're both current gen video games. Is this a current gen video game? No, but it is so impressive, and I cannot harp on enough about having a look at it inclusive of Game Pass. I'm not sure the deal with the Xboxes, so have a look, let me know. It's on the EA app, and you might have some of those graphics modes and options. Should you play this now before that remake comes out? It's up to you, because if you're a massive sci-fi fan like me, you probably want to just play them both. But it's a really enviable position, because I'd love to do the old Little Miss Sunshine, and the first time I ever see this game is that current gen amazing remake we're going to see on the 27th. If you can't tell, friggin' love sci-fi horror. I'm going to stick loads of links in the comments and descriptions, and I'm going to put annotations up, and I'm going to screen grab my thumbnails because I've got some sci-fi film videos that I really would love you guys to have a good look at. Some of the influences all over the Dead Space games. So, as always, I'll see you down there.